He walked away from Wall Street firms managing $400 million portfolios to launch a gold company that educates before it sells. It's Mr. Brandon Thor. He is the gold czar, and he exposes the manipulation behind traditional finance. And Mr. Brandon shows why gold is the number one wealth move that most Americans ignore. We're here on the Marketer of the Day podcast with Robert Plank. We're sponsored by dfypodcast.com. We handle the back end so you can grow your podcast like gold. And here, we're here to talk about gold and money and what we should do with it and how we can play it smarter and avoid those death traps, pitfalls. So, Mr. Brandon Thor, glad to see you. Glad we speak.
Hey, Robert, thanks for having me. Glad to see you as well. Looking forward to maybe pulling apart some of these, some of these hidden things in this economy. But yeah, let's jump into it when you're ready.
I love it. Let's do it. They say what you focus on grows, and a lot of people are afraid of money or they don't pay attention to it. And then what happens to it? It goes back out the window. So it's good to have this education about money. But the more there's never a limit to how much we can learn about it, what's possible, how to manage it. But it kind of it blows my mind about what's happened in the last years and decades, right? Like money, it's all just in a computer. People play with it. And so if someone comes to you and says, money and gold, I don't understand it, help me out, help with the madness, the confusion, what do you think?
You know, I chuckle a little myself. I take a deep breath like I just did right there. And I think, okay, Brandon, how can you do this in a way where you don't see their eyes actually scientifically glaze over, where it's like a phenomenon. I've talked to a few optometrists, and we really haven't seen that glazing over actually happen. But how do I keep this simple and coherent? But here's the bottom line. When you look at money, and few people really think about it deep enough to really, really understand what is money. What is it? And it's a store of wealth. When we sell goods or we provide services, we get compensated for that, right? And so there's a way to compensate, and then that's wealth. All right. And it used to be very efficient, when you had the barter and exchange system, and, we've evolved. And so then, of course, we land on money, something centralized that you can use. So once you understand that, then that's what it is. Then it's, okay, so I'm storing my wealth in this currency or in this money. All right. Well, gold and silver was that money for thousands of years, and I would argue is still that money. It just simply because the fiat currency system is not popularized like it used to be. But gold and silver for thousands of years, that's what people used to use to buy and sell things. In fact, in the United States in the 30s, that's what they used. So it's always been that. And the reason why people like gold and silver was because you couldn't print it. It was rare. It was this beautiful, rock. And so it was a good internal measuring stick of value, because if you can't print something and there's finite supply in it, then guess what? Then you have a really good ability to say what something's worth, because you can peg it to something with a static supply, right? Now, This is what the problem we've run into in the United States is that when we print money and we amass debt, then we number one, we dilute the value of those dollars. Just like if you could print gold, you dilute the value of that gold, which would kind of move the goalposts on that measuring stick. So here's the thing. That's what gold and silver do. And what I'm here to do is to really rip the curtain back on these preconceived notions people have had on the dollar and on gold and silver. Because let me ask you something, Robert. Is it weird to you that something that's been around for 5,000 years, all right, it's been mentioned in the Bible 421 times. Nobody will argue with you, especially if you're with women, that it's worth something. Be saying, I don't think gold earrings or gold necklace. No one will argue with you. Everyone knows it's worth something. It has a very consistent track record. Why is something of that ilk? Why do you think that less than half of 1% of the investing public actually invest in that? Have you ever thought about that?
I have. It is weird. And I wonder why we got away from it, as you said, right? Because you have 1971 getting off the gold standard, you have 2011 and cryptocurrency. are we moving off just because the economy like moves so fast, or just like why is it 5,000 years of A and then 20
Sure.
years of B?
Sure. So you definitely got me on point when I really want to talk about. I'll fill in the blanks on that real quick. And the answer to that is simply because nobody wants you investing in gold. Okay, that's why. All right. If you invest in gold, you're not doing the banking system any favors because you're taking money out of the banks. They want your money sleeping late. You're not doing Wall Street any favors because they want your money so that they keep buy mutual funds and charge you fees. And you're not doing the U.S. government any favors because they want you to store your wealth in their IOUs. Okay, so anyways, that being said, why did we get off of this? All right, well, in 1971, we were in the Vietnam War. Okay, we had to balance a lot of debt to cover that war. And it became untenable for us to build up the gold reserves to actually have that gold standard that we had. Because see, until 1971, we were on a gold standard, and that's why the dollar was the global reserve currency, because it was just a lot easier to hold dollars or the receipts for the gold than the actual bullion. And so once we amassed all that debt, we couldn't amass the gold to back the printing of money that was happening. Nixon took us off the gold standard. But he did some tricky things. He said we temporarily suspend. So he froze the world so the world didn't make any crazy changes. And then he made that sweetheart deal with Saudi Arabia where we would give them all this military protection and then they would price the oil in dollars, the petrodollar, and it would be exclusively. So if you wanted oil, you need dollars. All right. So that's what made the dollar continue as the gold reserve, even though it made no sense as to why, because it wasn't backed by gold anymore. And that was the reason in the first place. So that's why we went away from it, by the way. Now crypto, I think we'll get into that in a couple minutes because that's an interesting article too. But we got away from it, and then what happened was the 80s and 90s occurred, and in the 80s and 90s, the global, or excuse me, the baby boomers were the workforce. That was the biggest workforce in United States history. We had a exploding GDP, a strong dollar, a $3 trillion debt ceiling we never went above. It was king dollar. So even though we were no longer backed by gold, it was the dollar and everyone else. So even though that was the system, nobody really had a counter argument as to what would be better. So the dollar was able to maintain its place, and then people just stopped asking questions as to, hey, wait, isn't that backed by gold? Why is this the gold reserve? It's only lately that they're asking questions because we've been so reckless in our printing, in our debt accumulation, and things like that. But if you want to understand, like why that continued even after we went off the gold standard, there's your answer. It was all about the tightening. It was a matter of just the political slide of words, and then it was a matter of after that it was the United States and everyone else. So it wasn't like now where China is actually the biggest consumer of oil, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like all these weird happenstances of history and decisions were made, the drastic ones, not because it was smarter, made sense, just because that's the deal that we made at the time. And then as you're explaining that, like my brain's even going back to like World War II, like the U.S. kind of was one of the few countries not flat, right? You had like Europe demolished, Russia, China, so the U.S. kind of was like in charge for a little while, and then but now the other countries have all these decades to rebuild, and now it seems like it's just headed towards. There's all these players in place, right? It's not just the U.S. and the world. Now it's like now these huge actors.
You're nailing it. Yeah, I mean, like, okay. So before World War II, there was two gold reserves. People didn't know this. It was the English sterling, which was also backed by gold, and then the dollar. Okay, Britain went bankrupt during World War II. The U.S. was the big winner. I think we all know that during World War II. We came out on top. I mean, that's really what drove this growth and stuff. And so basically, like I said, 80s and 90s after we went off the gold standard because we had the exclusivity of the petrodollar, because we were the biggest economy by far, because we were actually very responsible about our debt ceiling and things, and because our GDP was exploding, it still made sense to have the gold, the dollar as the gold reserve currency. But here's what's happening. You raise a good point. So after the year 2000, with all these wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and everything else, with all the baby boomers retiring, the biggest mass exodus in the workforce in U.S. history, in these new generations, which if you tell them they have to work a 40-hour work week, it's almost like they're going to, so speaking of World War II, like it's almost like they're going to Auschwitz. Like they don't understand, like a 40-hour work week is just the norm here. I mean, it's not like this horrific, like, torture. But the thing is that the whole dynamics change. And at the same time, countries have rebuilt, countries are starting to ask questions. And that's what you've heard of the BRICS nations, right? What's happening with the BRICS.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's
the rumors get to reset the currency, right?
the reset, exactly, because what happened is enough is enough, right? I mean, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Biden issued a lot of dollar-based sanctions to punish Russia. And what it did, though, the rest of the world took notice and they said, man, we have way too much dependence on this dollar. And then they started doing what we're doing right now, a little history lesson. They're like, why is that way? Why are we holding this currency as our global reserve? And that's what gave rise to the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. All right, now it might as well be the alphabet countries because so many have joined on. And now they put the dollar in siege because it just doesn't make sense anymore. And the two privileges the dollar enjoyed that allowed it to print money with reckless abandon, that allowed it to amass the debt that it did and not have the same consequences as, say, Angola or Italy, were the exclusivity of the petrodollar. And it was also the fact that if you wanted to engage in international finance, you needed dollars. They were the gold reserve. But guess what? They did not renew our exclusivity in the petrodollar. So Saudi Arabia will now accept other currencies for oil. A lot of people don't know that, but that happened last year. So we've lost one of the privileges. The other one is close to being lost. And without those two privileges, what separates us from Angola or Italy? And if those two countries quadrupled the money supply and was $37 trillion in debt, I got a good feeling that their dollar would be, or their currency would be in the toilet. And that's why you're seeing finally, after years where people are like, why the hell is the dollar not being affected by these policies? Now you're starting to see it. The dollar down 10% this year. You're starting to see that traction. And that's just going to continue because, believe me, you can't quadruple the supply of something and not have an effect, not have it dilute. And if a meteor hit Earth and it was filled with 4 times the global supply of gold, I got news for you. If I sold you gold a week before that happened, you'd probably want to punch me in the face because your gold would be going down quite a bit. I mean, it's just common sense. So, dollar's no different.
So I'm sensing a little bit of a pattern here. Like we said, that like the first step of some of what's happened is that just these random events of history happen, and then the kind of step 2 is that it continues, and we're just kind of accepting it. But then we get to step 3, where suddenly there's a shakeup when some country or just people ask, like, well, this thing we've been doing for 10, 20 years or longer, like, why are we doing it? And there's this shakeup, and then we wonder why the heck it happened, because we just kind of let this thing that worked for a while get out of control, right? You let the debt get out of control, let the derivatives get out of control. And how does that translate to us now as people navigating the new way of doing money? And you say get into gold, get into silver. So what's being like marketed out there, and what do you suggest?
So, okay, and now I'm going to pick up with the second part of your question a couple minutes ago about the crypto thing. Okay. So this is my belief, right? This is my opinion. This is not, fact or is in a book somewhere. But my belief is that, for the longest time, we really did have to look over our shoulder because even though we were no longer on the gold standard, we were so far and away just superior in in our economy and the way we handle our currency in the world's reverence for our currency than everyone else that we really did have to. Now, with all the wars that happened after the year 2000 and our move from a growth-based economy into a debt-based economy, which happened, and so we went from a place where our GDP was exploding and our stock market was up like 6,000% in 20 years to a place where, guess what, our stock market's up a paltry 59% in the last 25 years because of these crashes. So we totally changed here. And when you do that, then guess what? Then your strategy changed. And that's why gold didn't move for 20 years. It's say at $300. And then from 2000 to 2025, it's gone up to 1,100% in climbing. But here's the thing. I mean, the real thing to understand is the fact that, when you look at the world, you notice that every 100 years, the paradigm changes. Okay. And if you study history, it gives you a guidebook on what's coming next and also on how not crazy and unprecedented what's happening right now is. Because the news wants to just, make everything like, oh my God, breaking news, this, that thing. But it's like, no, not breaking news. This happened, when people were happy taking wheelbarrows of Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread after World War One. This happened, I mean, you can name it. In the mid '80s, when people were buying TVs in Brazil to shore up their wealth because those TVs would be worth 20% more at the end of the month. It was hyperinflation. So this happens. I mean, this is reality. We just think we're immune to it, and that's what's dangerous. Whenever you think you're immune to something, it is definitely when disaster strikes. But ultimately, look at we cannot service our debt. $37 trillion is untenable. I mean, people cannot conceive that. And I think it's become so wildly inconceivable that it's been normalized. And I don't know if you'd agree, but the number is something that we can't wrap our heads around. So we just say, oh, well, the sun rose today. I go about my day. I go to Starbucks. I go to all my places and, drive by Tesla and, live the American life and I'm fine. But they don't get that, like, this is not normal. This could change, I mean, it could change in a heartbeat. And, and that's really, I think, what people are waking up to. And I think that, outside of America, being an echo chamber, I think that if you study history and you also get publications from other places in the world, you'll realize that this problem is a lot deeper and a lot more severe than they're representing here in the United States,
Yeah, and it's scary because you look at the Roman Empire, British Empire, like I'm sure they thought they would last just thousands of years. They thought they would last forever. And then when you have this idea of America kind of overextending or building into the climates, some really scary stuff. And so, and you mentioned like cryptocurrency. What should we go there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and I was just going to get to that because I ran it off and when you were talking, I was like, yeah, that's what I was trying to circle back to. So my theory on this is, all right, when we were at our height of borrowing money, when the debt was just getting just unmanageable and we were pretty money quantitative easing, remember, stimulating the markets and all this stuff was happening. I believe that well, I don't believe I know that Americans started just thinking, wait a second, what are these pieces of paper? They started asking the question they should have been asking their whole lives. What are these dollars? And, what's the future of this? It doesn't seem like this is responsible. It doesn't seem like this is going to bode well for me when they could just print this stuff and continue to just, borrow on it. Like that can't happen forever. And so all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, some Japanese guy in Loma Linda invents this genius technology, that's going to just reinvent the world and stuff. So my theory is this. My theory is that crypto was injected into the economy because they knew that people were at a breaking point. Like they were at an inflection point where they were going to start looking for alternatives to dollars to store their wealth. And what is the place they look first? Gold and silver. I mean, without a doubt, I don't think you get another answer from anybody, maybe farmland from like two people, but like, that's where they started wealth. So they needed something to distract them from that. So all of a sudden this cryptocurrency thing came marching along and they started, marketing as this is the new gold, digital gold, gold's out. This is it. But here's the thing, when you really looked at it, behind the glitzy, marketing campaigns and everything, it was the opposite of gold because whereas gold is defensive and protective, crypto is aggressive and it's greed driven, right? Whereas gold has a 5,000-year track record, crypto has a freaking 10-year track record. I mean, Jesus was not betrayed by 30 Bitcoin. He'll tell you that. So, you understand that, and then the other thing is whereas gold, when you look at the 25 years, you had it going up 23 of those 25 years, but even when it goes down, it doesn't like, you don't lose 60% of your wealth overnight, where in crypto, I saw crypto go down like 70%, then up and then down. I mean, so it's like a heart monitor. And I think that represents people's heart monitor that are invested in it. So my point is that It is the complete opposite of gold and silver. It serves the different masters. It is a greed-based investment versus a defensive investment, but it's been mismarketed to us because they do not let you investing in gold and silver. Nobody does for the reasons I mentioned, because of the threats and hassle of those two multi-trillion-dollar industries and the biggest government in the world, and also because guess what? When you invest in gold and silver, you buy it from material like us, right? Great. We're happy to have a business. We earn a commission on it. If gold goes up 800%, do we break in your house and ship off a piece of that as a fee or something? No. You are the sole beneficiary of that. Okay. And the system hates investments where you are the sole beneficiary, where they can't get their piece of the pie or their fees on it or something. So that sovereignty that gold and silver presented, like that is just something that they can't handle. And so I believe that cryptocurrency was implemented as a distraction to keep people from investing in gold and silver. And what final thought on that is any investment that is solely dependent on public perception for its growth or its decline, for its price, is scary, because that means that as soon as the public perception turns, there's no bottom. And everyone knows tulip mania. Well, guess what? The tulips at one point were trading for more than villas, and then at the next point they were zero. And the reason is because they were sold at these auctions. One time there was an auction held, nobody showed up. The reasons have nothing to do with it, a lack of interest. The tulips, the block plague was ravaging Europe, and everyone was dying. So that's why no one showed up. But guess what? Because it was solely determined by public perception, they see nobody at the auction. They're like, well, tulip craze is over, and boom, overnight crashes. So, you always want to be careful of something that has no intrinsic value. It's only determined by public perception.
Right, because then it's so shaky and one little thing knocks it out. And well, they say that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So you've given us like 22 and a half different history lessons, it seems like. And we want to get to the point here where we're telling people to go to thormetalsgroup.com and just pursue this gold and silver and platinum path. But before we do, I kind of want to throw it to you a little bit and fit in the final touches of what needs to be in our conversation here, because I'm sure to some ideal question I could ask at this point, or we would like transition is greatly into pushing people towards gold and silver, but you're the expert here. So you tell me, in the conversation we're having, what's the hidden missing question? What should I be asking you? I just don't know to ask.
You know, um, I think, I'm sorry. This is ringing. Hold on, let me turn this off. I don't know why my phone is ringing here. Apologize. Uh, okay. Here's what I would say. What you should be asking me is, okay, you said a lot of things that are very complimentary of gold and silver. What are the negatives? What are the risks? What are the things that you aren't mentioning? Because all you've done is mention positives. And here's how I'd answer that. I would say the negatives are this. The negatives are that if you believe the dollar is going to get stronger, if you believe that gold and silver are going to become obsolete, then yeah, don't invest in them. Because if the dollar gets stronger, then it's going to take less of those strong dollars to buy it, same ounce of gold, so gold will go down as an investment. And if you also believe that the world's going to be singing kumbaya, and we're all going to get along, and these military conflicts are going to kind of dissipate, don't invest in those, because metals, people run to them in times of economic uncertainty and geopolitical uncertainty. And then finally, if you believe that we're going to pay out our debt and be responsible with that, then don't invest in metals, because again, the higher our debt goes, the less credibility the government has, and the dollar is representative of that credibility. So, I would first just, say that, because those are the downsides of metals. And then the last thing that I would ask if I were you is this, if you think about, all the things that you can invest in, right? And I know that I'm jumping in gold and silver, and everybody says it's a barbaric relic, and it's just a rock, and we're evolving. Like, why would we evolve from that? And I would answer, if in 5,000 years, with all the evolutions and all the different things that have happened in humankind, if we have not found a better measuring stick of value than physical gold and silver with everything. I mean, from when we were bartering and exchanging to the Roman Empire, when we had the coins to I mean, all the different rise and falls of countries and different currencies. I mean, we're never going to find one. It's just the most efficient measuring stick. And so, no matter what comes, even if we go to crypto, even if we go to digital, gold will always have a seat at that table. All right, there will always be a conversion where it will be okay. An ounce of gold is worth this much digital Fed dollars or whatever it is. So you know that you can always be confident that that precious metals will be that measuring stick, and it's just a matter of kind of shaking the conditioning and understanding where it's coming from. Because if you understand why you haven't heard about metals, if you understand that the reasons are all reasons why you should be buying them, not because people are trying to help you out and prevent you from making a bad investment, then I think you can get to the root of why gold and silver can provide you sovereignty. So that's what I would ultimately say. And this is coming from somebody that was an investment banker that saw gold as a barbaric hedge. We snickered at it when people would mention that they invested in gold, and it wasn't until I saw the returns that I was like, oh man, they're probably snickering at me because it's the returns don't lie. I mean, hey, look at you could be invested in whatever. It's a rock or it could be some complicated, sexy derivative, but something that's gone up freaking 73% this year. I don't care what it is. You scratch out the name gold, you put some sexy name of a pharma stock, and now you're a genius, hedge fund manager. So
Right. Well, yes. And so there's been a lot of talk today about just sometimes there's like lag time, right? Sometimes like the event A happens and there's decades that happens in event B. And so you look at the big picture of history, and I like what you said, like gold has never become obsolete, right? There's been all the other alternatives, like, oh, different types of metal, different types of pick girls. Now we put in the ones and zeros, but in the computer system, but still, system gold never gone away. And so all these factors that you said, right? It's just, if you think that wars will happen, if you think that debt will happen, economic uncertainty, then gold seems like this logical choice. And so, how can someone go and pursue this if they say, okay, well, Thor Metals Group sounds great, but I don't know where to go or what are the next steps? What are those next steps?
yeah, so and I'll finish with this. And this is actually the best way to do it. If you're considering metals and you're weighing it back and forth, if you can picture walking out to take out your trash on Monday or whatever day your trash day is, and looking down the street and seeing all the wives women on your street with the jewelry boxes dumping all their gold jewelry, saying, F this stuff, it's not worth anything anymore. If you can picture that scenario, then yeah, don't touch gold. That's the scary, that's a lot of risk. But if in no way, shape, or form can you ever picture that happening, then I think you're pretty solid that you're the right thing. Something that never's gone bankrupt, never gone to zero, etc. So here's what you do. Our website is thormetalsgroup.com. Okay. So you can go there, you can fill out a form, and that'll give you our initial guide, and we'll reach out to you. I kept this small on purpose. I've only picked out the cream of the crop as far as my brokers, people that I feel experts in the field. So you'll definitely get that expert advice. Now, if you want to talk to me personally, if you're a sophisticated investor or serious investor, or if you just have a decent sum of money, and I'm not talking billions of dollars, but you have a decent sum of money that you want to protect and you think you can benefit from talking to me personally, then what I would do is I'd go to www.buythorgold.com, and you can fill out a form and get an appointment directly with me. Okay, so those are the two ways. And then our phone number is 1-888-944-THOR. Okay, so 1-888-944-THOR. And then you can actually call and ask for me personally if you really do want to speak with me. As you can tell, I have no airs about me. If I'm open, I will take the call while I'm eating a tuna sandwich and chat up metals all day with you. So happy to do it.
Very nice. Well, you're accessible and you're something that we all aspire to be, which is like so passionate about something that you want to eat, breathe, and sleep with it. Like I'm sure that you eat gold flakes in your breakfast and you sleep with gold bars. And it's just like you've been so helpful in educating us. And you say that those two websites, there's thormetalsgroup.com. What we really want you to go is buythorgold.com. But yeah, buythorgold.com, and you can get that free guide there. And you can also chat with Mr. Brandon Thor himself at the button that says Speak to Brandon Now. And he's just from Thor Metals Group. They keep things simple. They believe in education and data. They're the right choice at the right time. And they believe this is a historical crossroad. We're talking about rising deficits, high inflation, increasing geopolitical risk, armed conflict. It's this volatile investment climate in which rise. Mr. Brandon Thor, they say that you look at what you can control and what you can't control. Can I control if there's some war in the Middle East or Ukraine? Of course I can't. So can I control what I do in response or in anticipation of those changes? Well, heck yeah. And so it's time to get educated. Buythorgold.com. And that phone number we mentioned is 844-944-Thor. That's 844-944-THOR. So let's go there now, buythorgold.com. Before I let you go, Mr. Brandon Thor, it's time for the scary part of the podcast where I try to stump you, try to put you on the spot by asking you about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind as far as a fun quote or lesson?
This is actually at first glance, maybe a boring lesson, but it's actually when people think about it, they're gonna be like, wow, that's very compelling. And this was something that someone told me in high school as a professor, okay? And he said this to me, and I thought he was full of you know what. And it wasn't until years later that I realized like he was completely right. And he said, you want to know the key to success? And I said, what is it? He says, if you always do what you say you're going to do, so if you always follow through on everything you say, it could be a project at work or whatever else, and you always return your emails, return your phone calls on time, within 24 hours, you will get to the top of any corporation that hires you. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. That sounds like just you're a good secretary. But now, years later, in iterations of hiring and firings later, and everything with my company and seeing the world, that advice is the truth, man. I'm telling you, Robert. If you do what you're saying you're going to do consistently, and people can rely on you, and you just return every email within 24 hours, every phone call within 24 hours, so you are Mister Just Consistent, you'll go to the top of wherever you're going. And if anyone's out there listening or want to shut up their kid, that's turned out to be true. In every job I've had, be it Guggenheim Partners as an investment banker, or even when I'm hiring here, because there's nobody that does that. It's crazy, But anyways, that's my answer there.
Right, like gold, it is rare to be had to have integrity and to be reliable. So do what you'll say. What a concept, and you'll go far. You'll go places. And speaking of going places, yeah, we want you to go to buythoscertbuying.com. And if you missed that phone number, it's 844-944-THOR. Mr. Brandon Sora, it's been quite a journey. I got such an education from you. I was entertained as well. So thanks for being here, and thanks for teaching us what we know about investing in gold. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Robert. I really appreciate it.